I was like in science class. I was lousy at science. But I liked science class because they had Bunsen burners. You remember those things you could, you know, I like that. But I wasn't much in science. But we had a great teacher. I don't know, it was 7th grade, 8th grade. I was a kid. I was young. And I remember coming in one day to science class. We had these kind of granite tables with the Bunsen burners and sinks and that. You've seen it, that kind of place. And we came into this class one day, and I noticed there was something different. The teacher had these 2 enormous vats of water. They were like, he had some kind of an apparatus where you could swing the water. So for a kid who wasn't good in science, I liked this. It looked like a show was going to happen today. It was going to be interesting. And the vats were, I'm going to 50 gallons, 500 gallons, 1,000 gallons. I don't know how many gallons there were, but they were hefty, deep vats. And they could swing easily. In fact, I was 100 pounds. I could move them like that. And there were 2 of them. So the teacher was just kind of talking about this or that. And all of a sudden he says to one of the couple women, could you just flip that over? I'm thinking, this is the greatest thing. Can you just flip it over? And so the women just kind of, the young girls kind of, all of a sudden and the water, tons of it, flowed everywhere. I mean, there were lunch bags, you know how that is, the lunch bags. They were pushed off the table. Pencils went off, or paper. But it just dissipated everywhere. It flowed. And he said, that was very interesting. I said, well, it's not that interesting, but very interesting. But he says, now, I'm going to show you something. We're going to do the very same thing with this vat, but we're going to do something like different. We're going to put like a gutter. Here's kind of a tubing that he put kind of like, hooked it up. And he says, we're going to turn this vat over just like the other one. We're going to have the water flow through the tubing now. And he says, and we're going to put some bricks at the end of it. So I put these bricks at the end. A few bricks. I don't know how many bricks. 100 bricks. I don't know. A few bricks. And he says, okay, to these kids, he says, I want you to do the very same thing. Same amount of water, same amount of force. They did the same thing. But now, because of this, you know, the boundaries of the gutter, all of a sudden the water started to flow. And it flowed with purpose now. All of a sudden, this water that just kind of moved some pencils and a few lunches and just didn't do a lot of damage, seem to have a lot of effect. All of a sudden, this water, same amount with this guttering, all of a sudden it flowed down this gutter, hit the bricks, and it knocked the bricks over. That's my story. Isn't that the greatest story? It knocked the bricks over. And he said to us, that was probably 7th grade, he said to us, what was the difference? And people said, well, this had some kind of a molding, some kind of a border, some kind of a gutter, some kind of a, yeah, he says it had boundaries. He says, and the boundaries turned into that, the boundaries maximized or increased exponentially the force of the water so it could have a tremendous effect at the other end. So he says, that's kind of like what I want you to think about. So I don't think science. So I went home thinking, I think that's why we have 10 commandments. That's how I was thinking. I think that's why we have 10 commandments. Because the 10 commandments are kind of like a border. And it says to us, it's kind of like a strict borderline. And it says to us, if you live your life within this border, and you could take the Beatitudes, you could take Matthew 25, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, go visit the sick, go visit the imprisoned. You could do whatever you wanted to kind of give your life a little bit of definition or discipline. If you live within that little boundary, I think the spiritual energy that I have will have more force. And so I started to live my life that way, in a sense that I didn't want to live my life where my spiritual energy didn't have a lot of discipline or structure. I started thinking, if I could live my life in a way and use the 10 Commandments or the Beatitudes in some way to define my life and stay within that kind of boundary, I think my spiritual energy that God has somehow blessed me with will exponentially have more power and have more influence or have a power to affect things in a much more powerful way. And the truth of it is, I think the proof is in the living, it's been a pretty good life that way. And so my first point I would like to make with you through my 7th grade story is that in your life, if you could reflect a little bit about what is it that kind of gives your spiritual energy some definition or some structure or discipline. It could be many different things. But for me, I kind of take the 10 Commandments seriously. I kind of take the Beatitudes seriously, or Matthew 25. And I try to kind of step my life kind of through that kind of structure or discipline or definition. And because I do, it seems for me to give my spiritual energy a little bit more force, a little bit more power, a little bit more energy to do the kinds of things that I think as a faithful person it's important to do.